The following three tales are the stories of people who have had strange encounters while out hunting. The next time you're out in the woods, make sure that you're the hunter and not the hunted. Number 1. I have been an archery hunter for over 20 years. We usually go into the woods a couple of hours before sunrise and put up our portable tree stands and wait for first light. We had scouted a new site and marked stand trees with reflective markers since we usually hunted the morning hunt. I remember finding half the buried foundation of an old house made from blue stone and mortar. I guessed it to be mid to early 1800s. There were signs of a barn, and an old apple tree was still bearing wormy fruit. You could tell this had been a small farm. We gave ourselves extra time to get out to our spot, but we were there earlier than we expected, at about 0300 hours. I put up my stand and sat in the mid-October coolness of the night, listening to the night sounds of the woods. I know the death screams of rabbits. I know the lonely calls of feral dogs and coyotes. I have heard most everything in the woods at night that swims, flies, or goes on 4 feet. I remember getting this slow unease creeping upon me. My sweat ran cold down my spine, and I began to look around, trying to identify what was making me tense. My mind began to put form and shapes to every tree and clump of bushes. My heart rose into my throat. There were no animal sounds. The night was so still, and then the half-moon came from behind the clouds. The sound started immediately, behind my stand, about 20 yards out. It sounded like screams, but not ripped from anything human. It slowly moved through the woods, but not crashing or breaking sticks or rustling leaves. The screams slowly moved around me, coming from ground level, but nothing was visible, always just out of sight. I was terrified to the point that I could not move. I wanted to get down out of that stand and run away, anywhere but there. It was driving me mad. I had to get away. I wanted to jump the 20 feet to the ground and risk a broken leg, just to get as far away from it as I could. The screams continued, it seemed forever, slowly half circumventing the small clearing I had my stand in, rising and falling, sometimes choking off, and then resuming a second later. It moved slowly down the hill towards my brother's stand, not abating or ceasing. There were no sounds other than the screaming, no sounds of struggle. Just the unbelievably loud screams of terror and torment. I heard it go down into the hollow where my brother was, and then up the far side of the gully and up the mountain, then fade away to nothing. When the sounds ended, I realized that 2 hours had passed, and it was coming up to shooting hours. I could move again, but I was shaking. I opened my water bottle and drank some water, nearly choking on it. I waited, trying to calm down. Finally, I was calm enough to get down out of the tree stand. I waited with my gear, ready to bolt. My brother came up from the bottom just as I was finishing. The sun was just poking over the horizon. It was still prime hunting hours, but he had heard the sounds as well. "What the hell was that?" he asked me. "I don't know, and I'm not hanging around to find out." I hefted the stand to my shoulder and started up the deer path that ran behind my stand tree. I told my brother, "It started just over there." That's when we noticed the 3 headstones from the farmer's family plot. We never hunted there again. Number 2. Before I start, I want to say, I'm not the type of person who jumps to irrational conclusions or is crazy about the paranormal. I was sitting with my back against a tree, watching a stand of trees. To my left was a stand of pines so thick you couldn't see more than 10 feet into them, and in front of them was a muddy path. I was just starting to get bored and thinking about doing a little still hunting when I heard a faint clip-clop sound, almost like hooves, to pull me back to reality. It started to get louder, so I turned my head to look, and about 40 yards away on that trail, there was a horseback rider. Ordinarily, that wouldn't have been strange. It was a rural area, after all, but something seemed off. He was dressed in all navy blue, and I remember thinking it looked like the uniforms the Civil War actors were wearing when I went to Gettysburg in 5th grade, and he had what looked like a Milsurp rifle slung over his shoulder. But his face really creeped me out. His expression was blank, emotionless. Ironically, he looked like he had seen a ghost. At this point, I'm kind of ticked off this guy rode through and ruined my hunt, so I whistled to him to let him know I was there. He didn't react at all. Now I figured I'd get up and follow him, give him a piece of my mind. He turned and went around the stand of pines following the trail, while the clip-clop of his horse faded. I turned the corner he had turned, and there was nothing. I could still hear the hooves, and like I said, I don't jump to illogical conclusions, so I figured he was just out of sight somewhere. So I turned to find a track to follow him by. That's the first my mind drifted to anything but rational explanations. There were no tracks. I weighed 180 pounds and was leaving clear impressions in the mud. You can't tell me an 800-pound horse didn't. I looked everywhere and could not cut one track. Nothing in the mud, nothing in the dirt, no wet prints on the large rocks that dotted the trail. I searched a 30-yard diameter, and nothing. At this point, I was getting a little freaked out, so I decided to head to another spot and put it out of my mind. The problem is, when I crossed the next ridge, I came across a headstone less than 100 yards of where I had been sitting. Partridge Run is known to have at least 2 cemeteries, and multiple lone headstones scattered, dating back as far as the Revolutionary War. The only thing I could make out on the faded stone was Captain, and underneath of it, birth and death dates. The death date being smack in the middle of the American Civil War. Needless to say, I was out of the woods well before dark that day. Number 3. My cousin and I went out to check deer feeders as we were crossing a field to get to a deer stand that was set up on poles 8 to 10 feet off the ground. We noticed what we presumed to be a head peering over the top of the wall, watching us. We were a good 100 yards off, but it was obvious that something was in the stand. My cousin wanted to check it out, but I got spooked. I don't know if it was that uneasy feeling of predation or my past encounter with vagrants at our lease, but I talked him out of confronting whatever was up there. We hustled back and told our dads what we had seen. We went back to the stand, but didn't see anything watching us this time, so we crossed the field, climbed the pipe ladder to the landing, and found open cans of soup, some dirty clothes, and a mutilated fawn. Whoever had been squatting in our deer stand had killed and was eating the young deer, without the benefit of cooking it. There was blood everywhere. It was a grisly sight. We never did run into whoever was surviving out there. Fortunate for him, because I was ready to shoot anything that moved after that. Hello everyone, and thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for future content. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter at Shivering Tales. I hope to see you all next time.